from the heart of the city too busy to hate. A progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first.
Refreshing, right?
Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, and thank you for listening. Weekdays, 4 p.m. on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn, 8 a.m. the following morning on Georgia Now, the rerun. So, yeah, it's refreshing that with this little pocket of the podcast sphere, the online streaming conversation does put we the people first. I say that because it seems highly unusual, you would think, that a state legislative candidate who has had barely any, almost no, opposition in his existence wouldn't have the needs of the people ahead of everybody else. I have half jokingly, I guess I'm honest about this. I have mentioned before that I actually kind of, on a personal level, like the House District Representative for District 4. His name's Casey Carpenter, and he's a Republican. He's not a big Marjorie Taylor Greene fan, although maybe he is more now than he was when we first talked. Not a big Trumper type, and yet he ran unopposed in 2024, and to my knowledge, as of right now, from everything I can see, doesn't have a Democrat stepping up to run against him in 2026 as well. But we still have, a few weeks left on the filing period before somebody else could step in. Casey Carpenter doesn't seem to be working on behalf of the people of his district, however. I want to play from you a piece that aired on News 12 WDEN in Chattanooga. This is reporter Nick Hill.
The Whitfield County Republican Party says they are opposing the reintroduction of a controversial bill. Now, Whitfield GOP Chairman McCray Kier said on Facebook that Georgia House Bill 2-11, sponsored by Dalton Representative Casey Carpenter, would be damaging to Whitfield County residents. That bill proposed last year would shield carpet companies from lawsuits over the illegal dumping of forever chemicals such as PFAS. Now, we've spoken to numerous North Georgia residents who have found substantial amounts of forever chemicals on their properties.
This is Attorney Ben Finley from PFAS, Georgia.
I think it's absolutely shameful and disgraceful that anyone would sponsor a bill like House Bill 211. The carpet industry is largely responsible for the PFAS problem in Northwest Georgia.
We have reached out to Representative Carpenter for his response to these criticisms. If you are surprised, we have not heard back.
All right, that young reporter, a little salty. Anyway, let's dive into that conversation. What's happening here? The lone actual Democrat running for Marjorie Taylor Greene's vacated seat in Congress, Georgia's 14th, Sean Harris, on August 13th, spoke about forever chemicals and the carpet industry poisoning the water. Clean water, of course, vital for a lot of things. Clean drinking water, agriculture, which is a big deal in Northwest Georgia, right? And how the carpet industry has ignored federal and state environmental law in using what are called forever chemicals.
Clean water is a basic need for everyone. It is something that we need our government to take care of. I've been talking to people around Northwest Georgia for years about PFAS. We all know the story. Chemicals that were supposed to be safe was used in carpet factories, and now they're everywhere from Dalton, Georgia, all the way through Rome and all the way through Northwest Georgia. Cancer, contamination, a lot of people don't even know how dangerous the water is, and it's especially bad for our seniors and our kids. It's a lot of finger pointing in court, but it's still not getting cleaned up.
See, it was in the 1990s that, well, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read you a little bit of an op-ed that came from the AJC editorial board that sort of laid the groundwork for this. So Sean Harris, August 13th, talked about PFAS, forever chemicals poisoning the water. This article came out February 8th, just a matter of 4 or 5 days ago. And they wrote, in the late 1990s, when carpet executives in Northwest Georgia learned the chemicals making their products stain-proof built up in human blood indefinitely, that's why they're called forever chemicals, they kept using similar versions for years. And when federal regulators tried to test water for the dangerous chemicals, known as PFAS, the local water utility joined forces with the carpet industry to block them. And when chemical-laden wastewater sprayed along the banks of the Conasauga River, sending runoff into nearby waterways in violation of federal rules, the Georgia Environmental Protection Division thwarted further oversight. And even the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which claims to be, quote, committed to addressing PFAS to ensure that Americans have the cleanest air, land, and water, for decades proved to be a slow-motion, often toothless regulator as the crisis over forever chemicals unraveled in the carpet capital of the world and beyond. For decades, the editorial board writes, the people of Northwest Georgia were failed by not only chemical makers and the massive carpet industry that polluted their waters, but also by the local, state, and federal agencies charged with protecting them. An in-depth investigation, and yes, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution partnered with PBS and AL.com and other entities in this in-depth investigation into this family of forever chemicals by the AJC, the Associated Press, and Frontline PBS, has for the first time revealed the depth and breadth of that epic failure, telling the whole story about who knew what and, more importantly, who it hurt. I will include that link, by the way, in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. There's a documentary. But by the way, the PBS website seems to be struggling. I wonder if that's got something to do with funding. Anyway, the editorial board writes, to understand the failure is to understand the culpability. Among the investigation's findings, two of the world's largest carpet companies, Shaw and Mohawk, for decades kept using products containing PFAS, which ended up in local waterways, even after scientific studies and regulators warned of their accumulation in human blood and possible health effects, according to court documents. The board of the public utility in Dalton, which is obligated to ensure clean drinking water, has long seen carpet executives appointed among its ranks. Records show that in 2004, fueled by the growth of the carpet industry, Dalton Utilities joined the carpet industry in resisting the EPA, essentially blocking the EPA's attempts to access facilities to test water. This is jaw-dropping. In 2000, an EPA official sent an email to his colleagues and counterparts in other countries calling the main chemical in Scotchgard unacceptable technology and a, quote, toxic chemical, saying this type of PFAS should be eliminated, quote, to protect human health and the environment from potentially severe long-term consequences. Still, the EPA would wait nearly a decade to issue the first health advisories on this issue, and even then they were provisional or non-binding. The AJC editorial board continues. Shaw and Mohawk both say they stopped using PFAS in their U.S. carpet production in 2019, and they say blame lies squarely with the chemical makers who claim their products were safe. They also note that state and federal regulators allowed their use. Those parties certainly are partners in blame, yet it strains credulity, the AJC writes, to believe Shaw and Mohawk, who relied on the land and labor of Northwest Georgia to build their billions, didn't put a prized industry over the health of their workers and the surrounding community. Let me repeat that. Those parties certainly are partners in blame, yet it strains credulity to believe Shaw and Mohawk, who relied on the land and labor of Northwest Georgia to build their billions, didn't put a prized industry over the health of their workers and the surrounding community. The damage, though we may never truly understand the full extent, is done, the editorial board writes. There are still PFAS in the water, soil, and blood of Northwest Georgia. And although the source of failure is clear, how to move forward from this mess is murkier than the polluted waters of the Conasauga. Now is the opportunity, they opine, for Georgia's leaders to step up and provide a clear path forward by cleaning up the contamination and protecting communities. Well, about that. Fast forward 2 days later, February 10th, Dylan Jackson at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution writes, a state legislative proposal that could shield Northwest Georgia carpet companies from a barrage of lawsuits claiming they contaminated the environment passed a committee on Monday, bringing the bill a step closer to a full House vote. House Bill 211 sputtered to a halt last year after legislators heard from a steady stream of lawyers and residents who said the law would let industry off the hook for the region's broad contamination from PFAS chemicals used to make carpets stain resistant. Such a turnout was absent this time as the legislation sailed through with little notice and fanfare. State Representative Stacey Evans, Democrat of Atlanta, said even members of the committee didn't know the bill would come up for discussion. She called the move disturbing for legislation of such magnitude and said it represented an, quote, end run around people. There was a crowd last time, and obviously there's no crowd today because no one knew, Stacey Evans said after the hearing. Lead sponsor, State Representative Casey Carpenter of Dalton, a Republican I actually like. He's been on this show. Said the bill faces an uphill climb, but says passage was a crucial step. For who, Casey? Getting it out of committee was important, he said. The passage comes as carpet companies face down numerous lawsuits from municipalities, residents, and others who accuse the industry of contaminating their properties and drinking water with PFAS, a catch-all term for a class of synthetic compounds, Dylan Jackson writes. The battle over PFAS contamination in Georgia has primarily centered on the state's northwest corridor, including Dalton, which is known as the carpet capital of the world. Dylan Jackson, again, providing background. Carpet makers use certain PFAS to make stain and soil-resistant carpet for decades. Some of those compounds have since been linked to health effects such as certain cancers, thyroid disease, and immune system issues. Testing has found these so-called forever chemicals at high levels in the region's water, soil, and people, which is in and of itself something of a minor miracle because, again, Dalton Utilities, with carpet manufacturers on the board, weren't even allowing the EPA to test those waters for years. Okay, so as I mentioned, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was part of this big collaborative effort for like a year or so. The AJC, the Associated Press, other newsrooms, AL.com, PBS, Frontline, found the region's largest carpet companies, Shaw Industries and Mohawk Industries, used stain-resistant PFAS chemicals for years despite growing concerns about health effects, Dylan Jackson writes. The companies have previously said their chemical suppliers assured them their products were safe and that they ceased using PFAS in U.S. carpet production in 2019. Shaw and Mohawk did not respond to a request for comment for this story. So here we are with Georgia Republican legislators hastily and quickly and quietly pushing forth legislation that would classify carpet manufacturers, municipalities, and others as so-called PFAS receivers and shield them from liability in PFAS litigation. I guess it would go to the chemical companies. The bill would not protect chemical manufacturers and therefore not shut the door on future lawsuits against companies that manufacture the chemicals, such as 3M and DuPont. In 2023, Shaw and Mohawk settled a PFAS lawsuit brought by the city of Rome for $65 million and $42.5 million, respectively. Neither admitted liability. Rome filed a lawsuit in 2019 alleging it would cost $100 million to build a new treatment plant able to filter the chemicals out of the city's drinking water. Immunity would not be granted to receivers who are found to have acted with, quote, gross negligence, defined as an, quote, intentional deliberate action with a reckless disregard for consequences. April Lipscomb, a senior attorney for the Southern Environmental Law Center, said this standard is much greater than what plaintiffs in Northwest Georgia have typically had to prove in litigation so far, saying gross negligence puts an incredibly high burden on the plaintiffs, not the defendants. In that wide-ranging piece that the AJC worked with AL.com and PBS Frontline, they write, for many, the lack of state and federal PFAS regulations means the courts are their only chance for accountability. Georgia environmental officials have done little to regulate forever chemicals beyond drafting drinking water limits on two types of PFAS, deferring to their federal counterparts. The Trump administration's EPA has said it intends to remove drinking water limits finalized by the Biden administration for some forever chemicals and is delaying limits on others until 2031. Should we send them a box of drinking water from just downriver from a Shaw Chemicals plant, maybe? Sip, sip, buddy. EPA said it's working on better PFAS detection methods. EPA is actively working to support water systems who are working to reduce PFAS in drinking water, an agency spokesperson said in a statement. Putting the onus on the municipalities and not the polluters, of course. In a statement, Georgia EPD pointed to testing it has done throughout the state. If PFAS is found above health advisory levels, the agency said it works to ensure safe drinking water is available. Last year, several Northwest Georgia legislators proposed a state bill that would have shielded carpet companies from PFAS lawsuits. The lead sponsor, State Representative Casey Carpenter of Dalton, said legal action should target chemical makers, not carpet companies. Back then, the bill failed, but as I read to you just earlier, they snuck it through again without a whole lot of scrutiny from the public. Carpenter says there needs to be some kind of federal deal where money is dumped in for cleanup. That, to me, is a solution. That, to me, is a federal slush fund, a pork barrel earmark that I thought fiscal conservatives didn't like. Back to the forever stained piece in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The pollution continues. Dalton Utilities, in its own lawsuit against carpet and chemical companies, I'm surprised they were allowed to do that with the carpet companies on the board, right? Said PFAS applied long ago at the sprawling Loopers Bend land application system will continue to spread for the foreseeable future. The suit estimated PFAS contamination cleanup would likely exceed hundreds of millions of dollars. The contamination that exists today is the result of the carpet industry's use and application of PFAS and PFAS-containing products purchased from chemical suppliers, the utility said. Sludge spread by local municipalities to fertilize farms and yards over decades has pushed the crisis past the banks of the river and has heightened fears among some people over contamination in the local food supply. Enjoy your trip to the farmers market in Rome. PFAS Georgia said it has collected more than 2,600 samples of dust, soil, and water from hundreds of properties. The group said it has detected PFAS at levels exceeding EPA limits in over half of its water samples. No such limits exist for dust or soil, but the sampling has found the compounds at high levels in both, particularly in the dust inside people's homes. This is infuriating to read. And then there's more. Last year, Lisa Martin, the retired Mohawk manager, received her results from the Emory study. Her blood tested higher than most Americans for a type of PFAS used by the carpet industry. After she moved to Calhoun decades ago to work in carpet, Martin's health declined. She has struggled with a suppressed immune system and long COVID. There were the nodules on her thyroid. She began to suspect PFAS, saying, "What are the odds with my health that I'm going to live to old age?" said Martin, age 64. Who said she struggles with guilt from years of silence when she worked at Mohawk. Like many of her neighbors, she also wrestles with a sense of betrayal. How many people have lost their health, she asked, because somebody made a decision not to do anything? And again, this takes me back to House Bill 211, which sputtered to a halt in 2025, revived by lead sponsor, State Representative Casey Carpenter, Republican of Dalton, who, as of right now, still has no Democratic opposition. We'll discuss that when the Ron Show returns. I said it before. I actually think Casey Carpenter is one of those Republicans who you can sit down and have a conversation with and you might find some common ground with. That being said, the fact that he has revived legislation to protect the carpet industry at the expense of the residents in his district and throughout Northwest Georgia, all of Northwest Georgia's 14th congressional district, to me, just runs counter to what politicians are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be advocating for the 59,585 or so residents that live in his district and not the two businesses that employ a percentage of the people that live in his district. However, the fact that he revived House Bill 211, which was going to protect the carpet industry in and around Dalton from legal ramifications of using forever chemicals in their stain resistance, to me is just kind of alarming. And I get it. The supposition being that, if it's the chemical companies that continued supplying the forever chemicals, but the carpet makers didn't know that. Okay, but does the legislation provide a caveat for if, I don't know, a whistleblower and evidence comes forward that Shaw and or Mohawk, and I'm not saying that either are guilty. I'm just saying, as an example, if a whistleblower came forward and said, actually they did know and they looked the other way. I mean, there has to be a carve out for that sort of thing, right? You can't just blanket protect an industry from recrimination, from litigation, if they've been poisoning groundwater, stream and drinking water. It's now in the bloodstream of your constituents. You can't just give them a blanket pass, right? This is an opportunity for Democrats, an opportunity for state Democrats to find someone, anyone, can they fog a mirror, to run for House District 4. Again, no animosity towards Casey Carpenter. One of the good ones. One of the few. But that being said, at the end of the day, this is a team sport, and much more can be done in the Georgia legislature if Democrats can take the House, can take the Senate, can win the governor's race, right? Republicans have had that trifecta for more than 2 decades now, and all we have is polluted drinking water, polluted bloodstreams in Northwest Georgia. We're rated 41st in the country, in the nation to raise a family, 39th in child well-being, 48th in mental health access, among the highest maternal mortality rates in the country. This is information I'm borrowing from gubernatorial candidate Mike Thurmond. But hear this from State Senate Minority Leader Harold Jones from my hometown of Augusta, Georgia.
No, I don't agree with this. They say that Georgia's the number 6 best football team in the nation at the end of the rankings. Now, I know they didn't win a championship. They're better than 6.
Okay.
That makes you mad. Let me give you some other numbers that ought to make you mad. You've heard about Georgia being the number 1 state to do business. But did you realize Georgia has the 37th worst child poverty rates within the nation? 37th. Isn't that something? Overall poverty within Georgia actually is, guess what? 14th highest in the nation. We have the 14th highest poverty rate in the nation. And of course, one of the things we always talk about within the state is health care. We know we want to expand Medicaid. We know we actually want to do those subsidies to help people keep their insurance. This is why we always talk about that. Georgia actually is 48th in the nation as far as health care is concerned. Now, you want to know who to blame for all of that? Well, let me tell you this. For the past 22 years, this state has been controlled by Republicans.
There you go. Do you need any more motivation to find us a candidate in House District 4 to run against Casey Carpenter, who just so happens to be a Democrat, even if it's a good one? It's The Ron Show. Georgia Now, Progressive Voice via TuneIn, wherever you podcast. Back after this.
This is The Ron Show.
Heard weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn, 8 a.m. the following morning on Georgia Now as well. We call that the rerun. The story caught my attention in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution a couple of days ago, and then I saw a friend commenting completely independent of that on social media, and I'll bring her on in just a second, but first let me give you a little bit of the setup. Adam Van Brimmer at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting from Richmond Hill, Georgia. The nickel in your pocket is worth 5 cents. Nickel, the refined metal, is much more precious, especially in the age of electric vehicles. A nickel refinery, the rare missing link in Georgia's robust EV supply chains that already includes vehicle assembly lines, battery plants, parts factories, right? But an effort to close that loop and manufacture the lightweight, power-enhancing metal that is a primary component in EV batteries at a coastal Georgia facility has stalled out like an EV that's run out of juice. A nickel refinery planned for the same county that is home to Hyundai's EV assembly plant and soon-to-open battery facility has met with backlash since its public unveiling last month. On Tuesday, the Development Authority of Bryan County Board voted to notify the refiner, Westwind Elements, that it would decline all requests for incentives and development bond issuances going forward. The decision doesn't block Westwind from converting a manufacturing facility formerly home to Caesarstone, a quartz countertop maker, into its refinery. The company could still purchase the vacant site and set up its operations, provided it stays within current zoning regulations. Westwind had not responded to multiple requests for an interview or comment from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as of Wednesday morning. In a statement issued to The Current, a coastal Georgia online news outlet, the company's CEO said she is, quote, focused on progressing our project in Richmond Hill, which doesn't seem to set well with my friend Jennifer, who has gone through a lot with her husband and daughter. I saw in your social media post yesterday that you brought us back to what you guys went through in Conyers back in 2024 when you and Ash, good buddy of mine as well, packed up and took off to flee a nasty chemical fire that was just down the road from your house. Jennifer, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you doing so. This has to be somewhat frustrating. And I even looking at the photos from your yard, essentially, and looking at that burn and realizing that here you are again, potentially in the throes of a facility that could do more than just create air pollution, but obviously you're talking about water and soil issues as well. Your thoughts on having moved, and it's not specifically why you moved to Richmond Hill, but knowing that you went through that in Conyers, and here you are in Richmond Hill thinking you guys have bought your new home, brand new, you're laying roots, foundation, you're near your daughter's grandfather and grandmother, and here you are again, potentially dealing with some environmental concerns.
Right. So obviously this is deeply personal. It's something that affects me, my family. But also I'm just worried about our community. We are on protected wetlands. We have marshes. We have dolphins, manatees, so much wildlife. People fish. We have so much here to offer. A nickel refinery that's refining nickel, cobalt, putting all of these toxic elements, heavy metals into the air, into the water. It just doesn't make sense here. I think I'm really for creating strong American jobs and kind of rebuilding this domestic industry, but placing a nickel refinery in this environmentally sensitive coastal community does not make any sense to me.
Yeah, and let's talk about this. This is a refinery, not where they found the nickel in the ground, not where you're actually grabbing it out of the earth. This is just this is like an oil refinery. Where an oil refinery is isn't necessarily where there's oil beneath the ground. That's just where they're refining it.
Correct. And I guess my concern there is when we're refining nickel and cobalt, it absolutely releases hazardous pollutants. The West Wind CEO has kind of gone over her plan to keep all of this contained. But from my experience, accidents can happen. And when that happens, it affects everyone. My concern about accidents here is kind of on red alert because I read through their, they have an expedited request in for their air pollution. And in reading that, they're trying to skirt by expectations and mandates and just do the bare minimum requirements. And I don't think that's good for our community.
And let's talk about this. The refining process uses nickel carbonyl, considered among the most toxic chemicals used in industry. Not that industry, in industry, period. That, and I covered this yesterday. We were discussing the PFAS situation in Northwest Georgia. And we have a movement in the General Assembly right now by a Republican legislator who represents the people of that district to let the carpet manufacturers off the hook from legislation for all of the toxicity that has been found, not only in the drinking water in that area, but in the bloodstreams of residents. It has to give any Georgia resident, no matter where they live, pause to allow a nickel refining manufacturer into their part of the state if the politicians at the state level are willing to give manufacturers or industries a free pass if and when they happen to pollute.
It's terrifying. It is.
Let's go back to the Conyers situation because, again, there was a lot of permissiveness that prevailed in not just the aftermath, but obviously the lead up to that nasty disaster as well. We find out in retrospect that the company had skirted a lot of procedures, and there was a lot of looking the other way from local and state regulators. That too had to be frustrating. And you guys in the aftermath, making sure that you were made whole, that you were compensated, that was a frustrating process too. Let us a little bit in on that.
So two things there that are just incredibly upsetting. We learned after the fact that wasn't the first fire.
Yeah.
That wasn't the first biolab fire. About 20 years prior, the same incident happened and multiple people were affected. And they kind of went door to door offering $2,000 settlement checks, and that was that. Now, same thing, fire happened, and there has not been compensation. We tried to make a claim through our homeowners insurance, and they said it was pollution, so they weren't going to cover it. Remediation would have cost $36,000 for decontamination services, and obviously we could not do that. So we moved seeking clean air, safe environment, safety for our daughter.
And you live in a lovely neighborhood. I mean, in a lovely part of the state. Having gone down there and working with you guys on that perch. I mean, what was that park that you took us to with the docks? Was that your parents' subdivision? I'm trying to remember which subdivision that was. I think it was your parents' subdivision.
Yes, they live in the Waterways Township.
Love it.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, natural, preserved neighborhood. And right, there's docks here. There's boating, fishing, again, wildlife. There's dolphins. There's manatees. There's all of this wonderful coastal nature, and that just it does not work with heavy industrial nickel refining.
Yeah. But let's, I want to point this out as well. In the article I'm reading from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Bryan County's top elected official, Commission Chairman Carter Infinger, noted that the refinery site is just 2 miles from a 10,000 home residential community known as Heartwood at Richmond Hill, and 3 miles from a high school, middle school, and elementary school complex. Is your daughter zoned for that elementary school?
She is not zoned for the elementary school. She would be zoned for the high school. The concern there with sensitive populations. You've got the Heartwood development with communities, with neighborhoods, with parents, families, children, the schools. Across the street, Del Webb is building a 55 plus senior community. As we know, seniors face greater risks with asthma, with pollution. So all of these sensitive populations are right there within a very small radius.
So it's my understanding from reading the reporting here that there aren't any incentives that the county's offering for West Wind to take on this development. But are there enough impediments, or are local elected officials having to consider whether or not to create some impediments to keep them from refining in that area?
So from my understanding, the development board went ahead and took away the incentives. They're not working with them anymore.
Yeah.
That means they do have to raise enough capital to purchase the facility and move forward. Looking into it, they don't have the money now, but there are local representatives that have been meeting with them for months at this point, and I'm just not sure how that's going to progress.
So is there a community-led movement or an organization or organizations that are working to keep this from happening? Are there protests? Talk to me a little bit about what sort of activity is happening in and around Richmond Hill to keep this refinery from landing there.
There are absolutely some local Facebook groups and Facebook pages that are dedicated to keeping everyone informed and requesting that people reach out to our representatives, go to the meetings, email, call, message people, get the word out, but also ask for help, ask for protection, ask our representatives to do the right thing and to protect this sensitive community.
All right. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us, giving us a little bit of a personal background on what is happening down there in Southeast Georgia. Always lovely to get down there when I can. God, it's just such a long drive. To this day, I still wish we had high-speed rail that connected the rest of the states, because I'd love to get down there more often than I'm able to, unfortunately. But it will happen very soon, I promise you. Tell Ash and Little Bit that I said hello, okay? I miss you guys a bunch.
Absolutely. We miss you too. Hope to see you soon.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Understand, by the way, this isn't like a wealthy white NIMBY thing either. A nickel refinery, and in such close proximity to schools and residences. That's not the place for it. We'll follow that story. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. This is The Ron Show. Back after this. There is so much to unpack from the Pam Bondi appearance yesterday. And in fact, one of the exchanges, including that of Georgia Congresswoman Lucy McBath and Pam Bondi. If you ever get a chance to meet Representative McBath, just what a kind lady. It's so hard for anyone to be acrimonious with her. And yet Pam Bondi, like most MAGA, she just knows no bottom, knows no floor. We'll get into that a good bit in the second half of today's show. I'm actually on the same page with, get this, Eric Erickson, who is like a broken clock, right? It's perplexing. Yeah, he's a conservative talk radio firebrand, and he's on dozens of stations across the country and does a lot of that disinformation / misinformation / lie by omission. But he's one of those people that, because he, as misguided as I think he can be by his faith or his interpretation of his faith, like sometimes the good parts of his belief in good virtue that stems from his religion, sometimes it just shines through. Anyway, we'll talk about that next hour. First, I want to talk a little bit about the latest in what seems to be some ethics murkiness. As you know by now, the Georgia GOP gubernatorial race has gotten dirtier than it even had been prior to Rick Jackson jumping in. Rick, by the way, is having his Trump bona fides challenged on social media. Yeah, there's that. He came out the gate pledging to spend, $10 million on an ad buy. There's, $14 million or so spent so far or pledged to be spent so far against current Lieutenant Governor and Trump-endorsed Burt Jones. While, again, Jackson has come out and said, he's a pro-Trump Republican, or insinuates, like Donald Trump, he doesn't owe anybody anything. The insinuation is there without blatantly just saying, I've been endorsed by Trump. Just saying his name is not illegal. You can say that in your campaign ads. And polling, by the way, is showing that right out the gate, Rick Jackson is a lead dog. I mean, Brad Raffensperger, Chris Carr, afterthoughts. It's Burt Jones versus Rick Jackson. And I'll get to the ethics part in a little bit. But first, let me share some polling with you. In the most recent coefficient polling done February 8th and 9th, with 1,123 likely Republican primary voters, Rick Jackson leads with 24% of the vote, ahead of the Trump-endorsed Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. That's nearly 1 in 4 GOP voters who hardly know Rick Jackson. But in just a matter of days of media blitz, ad media blitz, mostly of it biographical, in just a matter of days, Rick Jackson has 1 in 4, nearly 1 in 4 of likely GOP voters pleased with him as their choice. That's an 8% lead over Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who has been the presumptive nominee for all intents and purposes. It leaves Jones now in Raffensperger Carr territory. And again, it's still early. I mean, we still haven't even officially had the filing thing going on yet, and the primary's not till May 19th. And who knows who else might enter between now and then? Nobody saw Rick Jackson entering, right? But here's where it all gets even murkier. We now have conversations going on about the State Ethics Commission. David Wickert reporting at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution Tuesday that they filed new charges against this mysterious group that spent millions of dollars attacking Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, softening him up, if you will, as he seeks the Republican nomination for governor. Meanwhile, Republican Rick Jackson asked a federal judge to stop Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones from raising unlimited campaign cash through his leadership committee. The developments are the latest sign that this year's governor's race will be bitter and expensive. David Wickert continues, one example, the group Georgians for Integrity has spent millions of dollars on ads attacking Jones. The Delaware-based group has no public face and has not disclosed its donors, making the powers behind the group one of the race's most intriguing mysteries. Remember, Republicans, you can't be upset about that because those are the rules that you wanted to protect. Democrats have been wanting to get rid of Citizens United for a long time. In December, the Georgia Republican Party filed an ethics complaint accusing Georgians for Integrity, now that's rich, of illegally influencing the governor's race without registering or disclosing finances. Now the State Ethics Commission has added its own charges, saying the group failed to register and report lobbying activity as required by law. The notice of violations, dated Tuesday, say the ads have encouraged people to call Jones and urge him to change state laws on legislator pensions and eminent domain, the practice of the government taking private money for public use. The ads also have opposed a Butts County data center and hospital development on property owned by Jones' father. The notice says those ads amount to lobbying activity. Oh, I see what you're doing there. That should be reported under Georgia law. A representative for Georgians for Integrity did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Meanwhile, Rick Jackson, according to David Wickert, announced a federal lawsuit challenging Jones' ability to fund his campaign for governor through his WBJ Leadership Committee. This has always been sort of confusing to me, and forgive me if I'm not able to explain it very well, but I'll read what Wickert gave me here. Georgia law limits campaign contributions to candidates for public office. Currently, individual contributions to candidate committees are capped at $8,400 for primary and general elections and $4,800 for runoffs. Legislators and candidates for statewide office also cannot raise money while the state legislature is in session. But in 2021, state lawmakers created a new type of political body called a leadership committee. Such committees can raise unlimited cash, coordinate with candidates, and raise money during the legislative session. Under Georgia law, only the governor, lieutenant governor, the Republican and Democratic nominees for those offices, and leaders in the state house and Senate can create leadership committees. Those are very few people. And think about this. The nominees for the offices aren't nominated until the primary, which is after the legislative session. So it's even more limiting. So essentially, it's the governor and the lieutenant governor. that can use those leadership committees to fundraise unlimited. That gives those who have them, like Jones, a powerful advantage over other candidates. Jackson's lawsuit filed in district court in Atlanta claims the law gives Jones an illegal advantage as he vies for the Republican nomination for governor. Jackson wants an injunction to stop Jones' committee from spending money on his campaign. It's the same argument former Republican Senator David Perdue and former Democratic candidate for governor Stacey Abrams made, interesting bedfellows, right, in 2022. They convinced a judge to stop Governor Brian Kemp from using his leadership committee to support his campaign until he won the Republican nomination. Jackson campaign spokesperson David Abrams. The days of Burt Jones playing by his own set of rules to benefit himself are coming to an end. Oh, but hang on. Shades of DNC 2016 in Hillary Clinton's corner with what's happening with the Georgia Republican Party now. Aaron Daugherty at Politico reporting that top state Republicans for Georgia have quietly opened the door for the Republican National Committee to support Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones in the state's hotly contested primary for governor. This isn't weeks ago. This is just 2 days ago. The RNC normally maintains strict neutrality in party primaries to let voters, not party leaders, choose its nominee. Any move to intervene in Georgia, however, could dramatically reshape a crowded race for an open governor's seat in a premier battleground state, Daugherty writes. It could give Jones, President Donald Trump's hand-picked choice, a boost in a field that includes Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a target of Trump's ire ever since he refused to echo the president's falsehoods about the 2020 election in his state. Georgia's 3 RNC members signed letters late last year and early this year waiving the party rule that bars the RNC from intervening in contested primaries, according to 3 people familiar with the agreement. That move allows the National Party to provide financial or operating support to Jones and coordinate with him ahead of the May primary. And then that coefficient poll came out. What you gonna do now? Let's lean in a little further here. Aaron Daugherty continues. It's unclear whether the RNC will move to support Jones, Burt Jones, in the crowded primary now that it's been cleared to do so. But it was the RNC that first reached out to the Georgia party leaders about waiving the rule, according to a person familiar with the process. Assign the National Party, which you know is run by Donald Trump's family, right? Assign the National Party has at least considered getting off the sidelines. The RNC did not provide a comment. However, Josh McCoon, chair of the Georgia Republican Party, said he signed the letter waiving the RNC's neutrality rule because Jones has Trump's endorsement. In other words, Republican voter, if you don't feel disaffected yet, start feeling disaffected now because your vote doesn't matter. You think Donald Trump has already weighed in, saying, Josh McCoon, it was a no-brainer for me to sign the letter. From my perspective, I was going to remove any barriers to working with the RNC from a candidate that the president has clearly signaled as the candidate he wants to be the next governor. Josh, I hate to tell you this. Donald, I hate to tell you this. The GOP voters that are being polled so far, they don't agree with Donald or you. So for me, the question is, at what point does Rick Jackson, who is now one of, if not the lead horse in this horse race, pivots to let the GOP voters in the state of Georgia know that the man he's been aligning himself with early on in his ad campaign is actually trying to circumvent their voice, their vote, to influence who will be the Georgia GOP gubernatorial nominee. It would be in Jackson's best interest if that's what he would like to be. Because sidling up to Trump right now, when Trump is trying to, through the RNC, brush you aside for a candidate that someone, Georgians for Integrity, I still think there's a tie to the Jackson campaign. I can't prove it. It's just a gut feeling, right? It just seems to benefit him more than anybody, and the polls show it, has already softened up, giving you the opportunity to step in and be the leader of the pack right now. What an awkward position for everyone to be in right now. And it's not my race, but I'm enjoying watching it. I hope you are as well. We'll keep our eye on it. You know we will. All right. Pam Bondi. So much to go through. We'll do that in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for listening to The Ron Show. Weekdays, 4 p.m. On Georgia Now, 8 a.m. the rerun the following morning, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast.
From the heart of the city too busy to hate, a progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Again, thank you so much for listening. Weekdays, 4 p.m. Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn. The next morning, 8 a.m. on Georgia Now, the second half of the show. And I know you're probably surprised, like, oh, everybody else is talking about the Pam Bondi meltdown at the House subcommittee hearing yesterday. Why didn't you lead with that, Ron? I figure everybody else is going to do it. Why should I lead with it, right? Consider this like dessert. You had a nice meal, very substantive, I thought. We're dealing with polluting in the state of Georgia from the northwest to the southeast. I enjoyed that. And then diving into the deliciousness that is, the saltiness that is the Georgia GOP gubernatorial race, with Rick Jackson coming out and in just a matter of days showing himself at the top spot polling-wise, while the RNC is trying to shut that down the way the DNC did in 2016 with Hillary and Bernie, right? And, okay, I want to hear from those of you who are like pointing fingers at the DNC back in 2016 for the RNC doing this now. Anyway, that's all delicious stuff, right? And it's very state-centric. I try to be as state-centric as possible. But the Pam Bondi thing was rather delicious. And before I get into some of the highlights that were boiled down, distilled down from our friends at PBS, let me play a little exchange between Georgia Congresswoman, Representative Lucy McBath, and current Trump Attorney General Pam Bondi. By the way, this was a masterclass. It was, to me, I thought what the representative did was finding common ground, giving Bondi and her Florida Attorney General's office credit for doing the right thing under her guidance. And then Lucy McBath says, however, take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bondi, as the Florida Attorney General, attorneys from your office handled the appeal of my son, Jordan Davis's murder, which was denied. As a result of the efforts of those attorneys under your watch, the court actually upheld the life sentence for a man who used prejudice as his defense for murdering my son and scarring his friends for life. Attorneys from your office, under your management, worked hard to remove a dangerous man from the community who terrorized innocent people like my son and his friends. The compassion and respect that my family received throughout that ordeal were critical in helping us keep faith in the rule of law and justice. Based on my experiences, I have seen how strong victim services, sustained investigations, and well-supported prosecutors can make a meaningful difference in the lives of families who are grieving and suffering. Ms. Bondi, just yes or no, would you agree that government officials should be respectful and supportive of victims' families as they mourn?
This is brilliant.
First, Congresswoman, thank you for talking about that, and I'm so very sorry for what happened to your family.
It worked.
And yes, I agree with that with all victims, including the ones sitting behind us today. I absolutely do. And also, thank you for voting yes on the Lake and Riley Act.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so your answer is why the recent treatment of families in Minnesota raises really serious concerns for me. Because shortly after Mr. Alex Preddy was murdered, administration officials referred to him as an assassin and called Mr. Preddy the definition of domestic terrorism. They also lied about Mr. Preddy holding a gun and threatening officers.
Damn.
After Ms. Renee Good was murdered by ICE officials in Minneapolis, administration officials also accused her of being a domestic terrorist and investigated her wife in a clear act of retaliation. The statement Mr. Preddy's mother made after the murder resonated with me more than you'll ever imagine. She said that, and I'm quoting, "The sickening lies told about our son by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting," end quote. And I assure you, I know how it feels to hear lies that are told to justify the taking of someone's son.
Yep.
They were used by my son's murderer as a defense, and those lies still affect me today. He was called a thug, and he was called a gangbanger. And the attorneys from your office actually defended my son's name, his memory, and defended his honor.
Yep.
I'm certain that Mr. Petty's mother watched videos of her son, Alex, an ICU nurse at the VA hospital, using his phone to record federal agents. She also watched him getting pepper sprayed, kicked, hit in the head, and surrounded by at least 7 agents before having his gun removed from his waistband, which he legally carried. And she watched seconds later as 2 of those agents shot her son, Alex, at least 10 times. Administration was quick to spew an incorrect narrative and call him so many things that they wanted us to ignore the truth that we actually saw with our own eyes. Ms. Bondi, will you denounce the statements that were made to tarnish the names of Alex Pretty and Renee Good, and will you protect their names like those attorneys back in Florida under your watch protected my son's name?
Brilliant.
What I will say is we are looking at everything to shed light on what happened that day, and it is an ongoing and active investigation. Both of those cases, and I assure you they will be investigated.
Investigating, we understand that, but will you do everything in your power, as you have done for my case, as you are asked to do, as you've sworn an oath to do? It is your responsibility to make sure that you are following the rule of law. Those families in Minnesota, they deserve the same respect. They deserve a full investigation, which you have not even begun to do yet. So what are you saying, is that they don't deserve any respect for a full investigation into their murders?
Well,
that
that's
is
not
incompetence on your behalf.
Well, that
the
is not
American
accurate.
people do deserve better. Non-commitment to defending the rule of law is what we see from you.
I
will
told you we
always
were
stand up for
investigating.
survivors, and I heard you say earlier when you told us that you will fight for them as well. And based on the information before us, these families have not received the same commitment to investigate what happened to their loved ones, nor have they received the respect that I would expect from the nation's top law enforcement officer. Investigations have been slow-walked, they've been canceled, and the special agent assigned to Renee Good's investigation resigned following pressure from your officials to reclassify Ms. Good's case.
Time of the gentle
For
lady.
families seeking answers and accountability, the withdrawal of investigative resources is simply unacceptable.
Has expired. The gentle lady yields back.
That was impressive. I literally was just, my breath was taken because it was one of the, listen, a lot of back and forth with Pam Bondi obviously garnered headlines and social media clicks and yada, yada, yada. And we'll go over some of those more salacious moments. But Representative Lucy McBath, the way she went in with the compliment and the way she layered the criticism with compliment of Pam Bondi's prior experience as a state attorney general in the state of Florida, to me, was something else. Incidentally, in case you forgot, when Pam Bondi was the attorney general from 2011 to 2019, that was when that fella, what's his name? Oh, Jeffrey Epstein, was in the throes of running his sex trafficking ring. That's right. In the state of Florida, it was Pam Bondi who was the attorney general when Epstein was luring Mar-a-Lago spa girls away, as Donald asserted. Yeah, Pam Bondi was the attorney general. Anyway, I just thought I would lead with what I thought was, if anyone's looking for a moment in what was otherwise just like confronting a trash panda rummaging through your garbage. I mean, it was just hostile and rabid and caustic and, God, that word, deplorable. There, I said it. It was deplorable, the behavior from our attorney general. Anyway, I wanted to spotlight Georgia's very own Lucy McBath for that exchange. We'll go over the lowlights when the Ron Show returns. Pam Bondi on the House Subcommittee floor. It's Georgia Now, Progressive Voice of you. Tune in wherever you podcast. In a few minutes, Eric Erickson is where you and I are when it comes to the continued employment of one Pamela Bondi, Attorney General of the United States. First, the highlights from her appearance at the House subcommittee hearing yesterday. First up, Progressive Representative Pam Bondi GA Repub.
Attorney General Bondi, you apologized to the survivors in your opening statement for what they went through at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. Will you turn to them now and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through with the absolutely unacceptable release of the Epstein files and their information?
Long pause then.
Congresswoman, you sat before Merrick Garland sat in this chair twice.
Attorney General Bondi.
No, can I finish my answer?
No, I'm going to reclaim my time because I asked you a specific question that I would like you to answer, which is, will you turn to the survivors? This is not about anybody that came before you. It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize for what your Department of Justice has done.
Members get to ask the questions, the witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer them.
No.
Attorney General can
that's
respond.
not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Because she doesn't like the
my
answer.
time.
So,
Not how it works.
Mr. Chairman,
why
I have asked
didn't
a
she
question.
ask Merrick Garland this?
Because this under seal, federal seal. God, you're the Attorney General. You should know this.
I am reclaiming my time, and when I
will
reclaim my
continue to
time,
answer.
it is
Mr. Chairman, the gentlelady has
I'm
reclaimed her
not going
time.
to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
Oh, that's Rich. The lady that brought a burn book doesn't want to get in the gutter. Representative Jerry Nadler next.
How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
6 seconds goes by, and then...
First, you showed it. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer
theatrics
the
are
question the
ridiculous.
way I asked it.
Chairman
How many have you
Jordan, I'm
indicted?
not going to get in the gutter with these people,
How many
but
have you-
I'm going to answer the question.
How many have you indicted?
Again, the time belongs
Reclaiming
to
my time.
the time belongs.
I think it's very
Reclaiming
interesting.
my time.
I think it's very
Reclaiming my
interesting.
time.
You can
that
reclaim
he
your
talks
time.
about they
Reclaiming my time,
indicted.
Mr.
The
Chairman.
president said they
Close the
indicted
clock.
him
Mr.
twice.
Chairman, please
They
stop the
sure
clock
did.
and stop the
he
clock and
indicted.
restore his time.
Okay, here we go with these
Committee will be in order.
theatrics.
The time belongs to the gentleman from New York.
She drunk?
We will give you a few more seconds. We will do that. But when
Reclaiming
you ask
my-
a question, the witness
question
gets to
was-
answer. You may not like the answer, but she
Right.
gets to
The
answer.
question was, how many of Epstein's...
They don't like
What?
the answer,
Reclaiming
Chairman,
my time.
because it's
Numeric
honest.
question.
So he asked a
Reclaiming my
4-minute
time.
question.
Restore 45
and
seconds,
I
Mr.
am
Nadler,
going
please,
to
Mr. Chairman.
Answer.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch.
Reclaiming-
Not on our time. No way.
Reclaiming-
And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I
anything,
did tell you because we
washed
saw
up
what you did in the
loser
Senate.
Lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Committee will be in order.
Time, and I should get back at least 45 seconds.
We will give you a few more seconds. I
Not a
said that
few more,
already.
45 seconds.
Okay,
Jim
I'm
Jordan.
timing right now, Mr. Nadler. Go
All
ahead.
right.
Reclaiming my time. The answer to my question, how many of Epstein's co-conspirators has she indicted, is zero.
Zero. Representative Hank Johnson, also from Georgia.
You are acutely aware of how important it is to protect the identity of victims of sexual assault, correct?
5 seconds goes by, and then...
I have addressed this multiple times. I think others were cutting me off when I was trying
Well,
to.
I just simply asked, are you aware of the fact that it's vitally important to protect the identity of sexual assault victims as you prosecute the people they accuse of assaulting them? Isn't that correct?
As we have said multiple times,
Protection of
protection
the identity
of all victims
of the victims
are
is
protected.
so very
Who are
important.
protected under? Do you want me to answer or do you want to interrupt?
Well, because you're not answering the question. You do a Jekyll and Hyde kind of routine around here. And I just want you to answer my questions.
What does Jekyll and Hyde mean? Can
Well,
you
it
explain
means
that?
you're nice to the
Explain
Republicans
That's
and you
filibustering.
turn like Hyde on Democrats.
Representative Ted Lieu.
I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
6 seconds goes by, a lot of eye rolling, and then...
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to
Seriously, is she drunk?
deflect
Like, legitimate question.
from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency.
Wasn't the question.
He's the one that asked that those files
I'm reclaiming my time.
be
I got your
released.
answer. You said there's no evidence.
Trump asked
Mr. Chairman, please
I'd like
stop
to
the clock.
reclaim my
Please
time.
stop the clock.
The legislation. This is
Time.
this
I'd like
is
to reclaim
ridiculous.
my time.
Time belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm going to put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, because I believe you just lied under oath.
Trigger alert.
There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is all on videotape. You said there's no evidence of a crime. I'm showing you. Here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center. He drove Donald Trump around in a limo. He overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on his cell phone. He was so angry, he was going to stop a limo and hurt Donald Trump.
Yep.
And he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off. Officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide.
Man.
No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness. You need to interview this witness immediately.
Yeah, why not?
Epstein should rot in hell. So should the men who patronized his operation. And as we say here today, there are over 1,000 sex trafficking victims, and you have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
The gentleman has expired.
Incidentally, conservative radio host Eric Erickson agrees with that. But here was her response. On to GOP Representative Thomas Massey from Kentucky.
Did you ask Merrick Garland that the last 4 years? Did you talk about Epstein?
I'm reclaiming my time. I'm glad you're asking about Merrick Garland.
You don't get to reclaim
because
time
this
when
is
you don't-
bigger than
when you can't-
Watergate.
when I don't answer a question the
This
way you
goes
want.
over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
And that's
now,
where the
I want to
most
know at
transparent-
what point did the FBI and the DOJ decide that Lex Wessner was not a co-conspirator? Because our Epstein Files Transparency Act requires you, please put it back on the screen, please, to release the internal decision about whether to prosecute him or not, and it's not in the files, and it's not in the files for any of these other men.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
May she answer?
And he's a hypocrite because he voted against the ban that we were talking about on deep fake AI porn. Only 2 people voted against it, and you were one of them, hypocrite.
Literally, was she drunk? I mean, she had to have had a little sauce before she went in there, right? That's exactly how it sounds like. There's a little. Also, Thomas Massey is correct to point out that this goes back 4 presidential administrations and back to when Pam Bondi was Attorney General of the state of Florida, Mar-a-Lago, in the state of Florida, where Epstein and Donald Trump palled around quite a bit. One of the saltier moments that you've seen on social media, Democratic Congresswoman from Vermont, Becca Balint.
Was the president aware of Secretary Lutnick's ties to Epstein when he chose him to lead the Department of Commerce? Was he aware?
Chris Malin was a Border Patrol agent.
Okay, so I'm going to conclude that the president, in fact, did know about his ties because he was the next door neighbor.
Shame on you.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
You're
this
from
is
a tiny,
pathetic.
beautiful
This is
state.
pathetic,
The
Mr.
committee will
Chair.
be in order.
I am not asking trick questions here.
You
The
got your
American
5
people
minutes.
have a right to know the answers to this. These are senior officials in the Trump administration. This is not a game, Secretary.
I don't know if that was a mistake or on purpose.
I'm Attorney General.
My apologies, I couldn't tell.
That's why I wasn't sure. What a slam.
By 2008, we knew that Epstein was a convicted sexual abuser. And we now know that Lutnick went to Epstein's Island in 2012. How was that not a deal breaker for the president? And why aren't you asking questions
For sure.
of the Commerce Secretary about what he saw when he was at the island, which he lied about not ever going to? Why are you not asking these questions?
Right.
And I see that my time is almost expired, so I will say this. Do the right thing, Attorney General. Meet with the survivors. They have been asking for a year. Meet with the survivors. Do the right thing. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
May I have 20 seconds of his time?
That'd be up to the gentleman, but
absolutely, Madam.
Thank you. I was curious if you, Congresswoman, asked Bill Clinton that. Didn't see one tweet, not one. I didn't see one tweet when Joe Biden was in office about Bill Clinton.
It was sealed.
Didn't ask Merrick Garland anything about Epstein, not once.
Files were sealed.
Weak sauce.
Also, I want the record to reflect that, with this anti-Semitic culture right now, she voted against a resolution condemning.
Is
Jewish.
I just want to be clear. Do you want to go there, Attorney General? Or do you want to go there? Are you serious? Talking about anti-Semitism to a woman who lost her grandfather in the Holocaust? Really?
I'm guessing that wasn't in Pam Bondi's burn book, which she showed up with pages of slams and put downs for those who were on that subcommittee who were from the other party. Oh, and Thomas Massie, the Republican that she and Donald Trump butt heads with frequently. Pam Bondi should no longer have that job. But the person that put her in that position shouldn't be where he is either, and neither one of them seem to have the self-awareness to know that neither one of them belong in the roles that they're in. There is, however, a conservative pundit who believes that at least one of them should be removed from that position. We'll get to him when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is the Ron Show.
All right, I'll get to conservatives turning on Pam Bondi in a minute. Still want to give you some audio from Pam Bondi that includes the likes of Representative Dan Goldman from New York asking this important question.
This is not under attorney-client privilege because it was sent from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. Will you commit to publicly providing the unredacted version of this so that the American people can understand the extent of Donald Trump's lies about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
You're about as good of a lawyer today as you were when you tried to impeach President Trump in 2016. Have you apologized for that?
Why apologize?
2019.
So will you unredact this? Will you
were
unredact
lead
this?
counsel on that. Privilege.
I'm asking you, will you unredact this?
Privilege.
On what grounds?
Privileged, of course. I look forward to discussing this more. Now, these are obviously improper redactions.
And let me stop for a minute.
I'm talking.
If they're not privileged,
quiet.
Don't yell at me. If they're not
Mr. Chairman, would you
privileged,
stop the clock? This is on your time. It's not on Mr. Goldman.
They're not
Even though
privileged,
you used your improper redaction.
You'll like my answer.
To
if
continue
we review them
to
and they're not
protect
privileged,
Time belongs to the
we'll
member.
be happy to release them.
We'll stop the clock. We'll stop the clock. Time belongs to the member. Go ahead.
Even though you used improper redactions to protect Donald Trump and other predators associated with Jeffrey Epstein, you did the exact opposite thing with the survivors and victims of this scheme.
Georgia-based conservative radio pundit Eric Erickson took to the Twitter X platform saying, when Attorney General of the United States is asked why she has prosecuted no one related to Jeffrey Epstein, and this is her answer, she should be fired or resign, but neither will happen, which is another reason the Democrats are going to have a good election year. Here's what he's referring to.
The Dow right now is over. The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader.
It's got to do with Epstein. What does it have to do with Epstein?
The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making Americans safe. We should be talking about, what does a Dow have to do with anything? That's what they just asked. Are you kidding?
Mr. Jordan, Mr. Jordan.
Committee? No, it's a valid question. What the does the Dow have to, or the S&P or 401ks have to do with the Epstein investigation? Oh my, that is like the ultimate gaslight whataboutism of all time. And Eric Erickson, God bless him, the broke clock that's right. Occasionally, he believes she should lose her job over her own theatrics. She blamed others for the theatrics, and yet she showed up with the burn book and filibustered and seemed to slur her speech, too. I'm legit asking, did Pammy hit the Chili's Margarita of the Month Club luncheon before? Yeah. And as much as it pains me to sort of turn the page off of those theatrics and the fact that here in the United States, we are being outclassed by our friends across the pond, the Brits. I mean, the King of England's had to weigh in on this. There are political ramifications, even within the royal family. People have lost clout, lost position, and instead, here in the United States, as you heard yesterday, no one is being held responsible. Not one person being held responsible. Outside of Ghislaine Maxwell, who, again, got preferential treatment in the prison system inexplicably. I mean, I'm heartened that Democrats are towing the line there. They're holding the line on this. They sought answers, got very few from Pam Bondi, and it's clear the Trump White House wants to move on from this and the million times he's mentioned in the files. For some reason, they want to move on from it. And yet, Democrats are holding the line and should. And I'm happy to hear that Eric Erickson happens to believe that Pam Bondi's theatrics yesterday are clear evidence that voters should choose Democrats over Republicans. It's also why I went back to my first hour of the show today talking about the 4th House district here in the state of Georgia that Casey Carpenter ran without opposition in 2024 and obviously won. And as of right now, has no one who has filed to run against him now. And yet he's ready to give carpet manufacturers a hall pass for polluting with forever chemicals, groundwater, drinking water, Northwest Georgia residents' bloodstreams with those forever chemicals. It's time to, and I know, listen, I'm not trying to give Charlie Bailey any heat, although I did reach out to him today and say, do we have a candidate in this district? I have not heard back from him. He'll get around to it. He's a busy man. He's the chair of the freaking Georgia Democratic Party. I know my place. He's done a good job, I think, recruiting candidates to run in districts that may not appear to be winnable, but I think these are the openings that Democrats have to seize upon. Not that we're taking advantage of the fact that people are being poisoned, but because people are being poisoned. Like, this is literally, you can literally go to a voter and say, so these local entities allegedly poisoned your bloodstream and could cause you to have cancer, could kill you. And that politician wants to protect those entities. You're going to vote for him? The voter might give pause. They won't say, well, is he a Republican? No, they might go, I don't think that person deserves my vote. Do I have another option? Democrats, give them another option. Anyway, I don't mean to turn the page, but I do want to go to an op-ed that Jamie Dupree at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution filed. The SAVE Act passed the House. I don't think it's going to pass the Senate. I just don't see any way where that passes the Senate. There aren't enough John Fettermans to acquiesce to Republicans on this. And that's kind of what Jamie Dupree is saying about the SAVE Act. He writes, while Republicans successfully pushed a bill through the U.S. House this week to make sure that only American citizens are registered to vote, the measure faces a difficult road in the Senate this election year, and Republicans may end up fighting each other over that. Originally, the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or SAVE Act, America Act, was only about voter registration, but then GOP lawmakers had an idea. Why not add in a requirement for voter ID at the polls? That's when things got a little messy. At first, the new GOP bill also required voters to prove their citizenship at the polls. In other words, voters would need a U.S. passport to vote, or they'd have to bring a driver's license and their birth certificate. A few days later, that was dropped, but that wasn't the only change. Instead of delaying the voter ID requirement until after the 2026 elections, Republicans switched to have it apply immediately. No matter the final details, GOP lawmakers all stuck together to pass the bill. The survival of our constitutional republic relies on free, fair, and secure elections, said Representative Andrew Clyde, Republican of Athens. Public opinion overwhelmingly supports this legislation. That's kind of not true. And it is our duty to adhere to the will of the people, added Representative Brian Jack of Peachtree City, Republican. Democrats countered that the bill was trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Georgia audited 8.2 million voter registrations and found 20 non-citizens. That is Representative Latifah Simon of California, Democrat. So what's the emergency? This might not be the only vote on election law in 2026, Dupree writes. House Republicans are also working on a Make Elections Great Again bill. Oh, I love that stuff, right? That would accomplish something that President Donald Trump dearly wants, as the plan would ban almost all voting by mail. But no matter what the House passes, action will still be needed by the Senate, where Republicans do not have 60 votes. Dupree writing, GOP leaders are unwilling to nuke the filibuster, but some House Republicans to demand a talking filibuster, like Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith goes to Washington. The armchair parliamentary argument goes like this. Backers of the Save America Act want to force Democrats to conduct a real talking filibuster. And when all Democrats have made 2 speeches, it's time for a final vote. Sounds so simple, Dupree writes. But the Senate's 2-speech rule actually allows 2 speeches per senator on every question, which could mean unlimited motions and amendments in a debate that lasts for months. It could mean that the loudest arguments over the Save America Act will be between House and Senate Republicans, not about policy, but about parliamentary procedure. As Dupree correctly punctuates, that probably won't get a bill to Trump's desk. All right, one more segment. I kind of want to go over the MAGA meltdown of Bad Bunny at least one more time. Meghan McCain, my God. We'll do that when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Final segment. Let's go to Jimmy Kimmel for the audio.
Meanwhile, here in the States, the MAGAs are still exploding with rage over the Bad Bunny halftime show. Republican Congresswoman from Missouri is threatening now to call in the FCC to report profanities that either may or may not have been uttered by Bad Bunny. Right. He has no idea.
What do you know?
The lyrics, from what we have seen from Bad Bunny, are very disturbing. And if it holds true that I don't speak fluent Spanish, okay? I know how to ask where the bathroom is, but these lyrics, if it is true, what was said on national television, we have a lot of questions. This could be much worse than the Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction. Let's put it that way.
If only there were some way to translate that mysterious code Bad Bunny used, we could get to the bottom of this once and for all. Let me see if I have this straight. First, you're angry because you didn't understand what Bad Bunny was saying. Now you're mad because you do? Okay. And there are a lot of people in the MAGA news media who are still making a giant deal out of this halftime show, which to my eyes was just some people singing and dancing, but so many of them are so mad, I think they might need to be medicated.
Yeah.
Depression, anger.
Stupid Bowl halftime show, that's the focus of tonight's angle.
Hallucinations, paranoia.
You see, all these foreigners speaking a foreign language with foreign flags marching into the camera like a caravan.
Involuntary muscle contractions.
This is supposed to be a unifying event for the country, not for the Latinos.
Sometimes it feels like your whole vida has gone loca.
Not one word of English?
Yeah.
Not one word of English? One word!
If you're still screaming about the Bad Bunny halftime show, there's hope. Xenophoba. Prescription-strength Xenophoba acts quickly to counteract even your dumbest, most deep-seated racist thoughts to get you smiling again. With Xenophoba, you'll be saying,
I love Bad Bunny!
Ask your Facebook friend who thinks they know more than a doctor if Xenophoba is right for you. Xenophoba. If you see someone brown, we'll calm you down.
Speaking of, by the way, the Megyn Kelly thing, the whole way the Latinos, oh my God, just dripping in racism. That from the Santa Claus is white lady. That's low-key awkward. But I got to also tell you, this to me just sort of epitomizes so much of what tracks with the experiences that many of us, Georgia and Southern-born folks, who were brought up immersed in the evangelical faith and culture have picked up on over time. Megyn Kelly's notable outrage over Bad Bunny's selection as Super Bowl halftime performer and his choice to entertain solely in Spanish. Lady Gaga, by the way, did perform portions of the Super Bowl halftime show in English. Anyway, that choice, Bad Bunny and Bad Bunny performing in Spanish, enrages Megyn Kelly. The same Megyn Kelly that sought to defend the wealthy and the powerful, and you know who. She's got room in her heart and mind for forgiveness or thinly veiled permissiveness even, so long as a molesting rape victim was in their teens. Come on, it's not like they were 6. That's the same Megyn Kelly. So outraged over a freaking exhibition performance during halftime of a football game. But find out somebody molested a 13-year-old? I mean, come on, they were 13. It's not like they were 4. What she and those who agree with her choose to be enraged by versus what they ought to be enraged by, to me, is noteworthy. And they're not just missing out on fury at the Epstein class. Okay, don't you eye roll, but I'm going to bring this up because I'm going to bring this back to Georgia. Because here in Georgia, conservatives tend to be enraged over, let me check the notes here, the results of the 2020 election that no one can find evidence of fraud in 5 years later still, but no scrutiny, let alone an opposition to appear out of nowhere for their elected representation drafting legislation to protect industrial polluters from poisoning their drinking water, leading to forever chemicals being forever in their bloodstream. I want you to try this. Northwest Georgia. Here's a little bit of a social experiment, if you will. Ask a conservative, or a few, what they're most angry about right now. I guarantee you PFAS chemicals in groundwater streams and rivers and their bloodstream doesn't crack their top 5, let alone their top 10. Good luck with it even coming up from anyone. Bad Bunny, illegals, trans people, Somalis, fraud. Betcha most, if not all of those come up in their top 5. Guaranteed it'll show up in their top 10 current grievances. Let me introduce you to Joe Smith. He's a media and messaging pastor at Maison Church in Gainesville, Florida. And he posted this to social media, and I shared it at Ron Show ATL on Facebook. I'll give it to you in the link in the show notes as well. He writes that outrage is a resource. It's not infinite. So it's worth paying attention to where it's being spent and where it isn't, what gets amplified, what gets minimized, what we've trained to react to immediately, and what we're taught to handle carefully. Those patterns don't happen by accident. And he shared this via Substack, so I'm going to read it to you right now. He says, why the anger was never about harm. He's speaking of Megyn Kelly and right-wing outrage over the Bad Bunny halftime show. Understanding the pattern behind culture, war, fury. He writes, that's why Megyn Kelly is such a clean example of this pattern. On one hand, you have her absolutely losing it over a halftime show being in Spanish, not disagreeing, not critiquing, full-on outrage. She frames it as concern for unity, for the country, for the hundreds of millions of people who don't speak Spanish. Now put that next to what she said about Jeffrey Epstein. Suddenly the tone changes. The volume drops. The rage evaporates. Instead, she's calm, measured, starts slicing things up into categories, talking about how 15-year-olds are different than 8-year-olds, as if that distinction is doing any moral work at all when we're talking about the sexual abuse of children. That difference matters, Joe Smith writes, because it shows you exactly what activates her and what doesn't. A Spanish language halftime show? 5-alarm fire. Powerful men raping minors? Let's slow down. Let's be careful. Let's not overreact. That's not inconsistency. It's prioritization, Smith says. This kind of selective outrage, doesn't usually come from people who think they're cruel. It comes from systems that train people over time to react to identity threats instead of human harm, or as I call it, white nationalism, xenophobia, racism. He continues, when a system is built around belonging, as in who's in, who's out, who looks right, who sounds right, believes right, it becomes hypersensitive to anything that disrupts that picture. Drag queen story hour, anybody? The existence of trans people? This is me talking, not him. But back to Joe Smith. Music in another language, different bodies, different joy, different stories, those things feel destabilizing, even if no one's being hurt. Meanwhile, real harm, especially when it's happening inside the group, gets handled very differently. It's inconvenient. It threatens the image. It raises questions no one wants to answer. So it gets minimized, softened, complicated, or, as we saw with Pam Bondi yesterday, talked around. You don't have to call that a cult to recognize the pattern, Joe Smith says. Most of us have seen it up close. It's what happens when protecting the group becomes more important than protecting people. Smith says, here's something I keep coming back to, especially as I look back on the churches and media ecosystems that shaped me. Outrage is a resource. You only have so much of it. Emotional energy, moral attention, urgency, none of that is infinite. So where a community spends its outrage tells you pretty clearly what it actually values. If all your outrage is reserved for art, language, and people who don't center you, and none of it is left for children being abused by powerful men, that's not a coincidence. That's conditioning. Smith writes, once you see this, it's hard to unsee how upside down it all is, how grotesque it is to scream about a halftime show while calmly parsing age distinctions to soften sexual violence. How disorienting it is to live in a world where outrage is loudest when nothing is actually at stake and nearly absent when everything is. Here. And it's exhausting, he says. Absolutely. It wears people down because you're constantly being asked to feel deeply about the wrong things and suppress your empathy for the right ones. The work is noticing when something in you recoils, when your gut says, this doesn't line up, when the outrage feels theatrical and the calm feels cruel. It might feel like a betrayal, but it's really just clarity. Listen to this, MAGA. You don't owe your loyalty to a system that keeps asking you to scream at the wrong things and go silent about the right ones. Let me repeat that for you. Joe Smith writes, you don't owe your loyalty to a system that keeps asking you to scream at the wrong things and go silent about the right ones. You don't owe your faith, your conscience, or your humanity to something that survives by misdirecting your outrage and shrinking your empathy. Smith continues, and here's the part that systems like this never want you to know. The most dangerous thing you can do to them isn't argue. It's to stop letting them decide what matters. And what opens up on the other side isn't chaos or loss or emptiness. It's room to breathe. Wow. I mean, that is an important message, an important distinction for not just MAGA, but you know what? Let's take this a little bit further, because I want those on the left to understand as well. When he said something about it's exhausting, it wears you down. Like, we're all worn down by things that have been occurring under Trump 1.0, Trump 2.0, and the presidency in between, when the hypocrisy was astounding on the critiques and criticisms, right? It's exhausting. It wears you down. And you have to do the same, those of us on the left, about making sure that when we're being asked to feel deeply about something that really doesn't matter to us, that we decide, that's not my priority, that's not my fight. And back to what Smith says, the work is noticing when something in you recoils, when your gut says, that doesn't line up, and the outrage feels theatrical and the calm feels cruel. It might feel like a betrayal, but it's really just clarity. You don't have to be enraged or outraged by everything to be outraged by the things that do matter to you. What Joe Smith said that I wanted MAGA to hear, I want the left to hear too. You don't owe your loyalty to a system that keeps asking you to scream at the wrong things and go silent about the right ones. It's why I like to think of myself, and I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal here, but I like to think to myself as something of consistent, because I still hold a little bit, just a tiny shred of animus at the party that I am more beholden to on Election Day, because they weren't very fair in 2016 in our presidential cycle. Did they break their own rules and laws? No, but they also know that the rules and bylaws weren't exactly fair either. And they've worked to address them since then. So, okay, cool. Of course, since then, we didn't really have a fair and an open primary then. 2020, we shut it down because of COVID. 2024, we didn't either. And so it's incumbent that in 2028, that baby better hum like a well-oiled machine and there be no hiccups. But it's also why I think it's important to point out that right now here in Georgia, Republicans, I'm speaking on your behalf here, the RNC has been given the clearance to weigh in on the Georgia gubernatorial race for the pre-picked candidate that Donald Trump has selected, and not the one that a plurality of those polled seem to be drawn to instead. Anyway, that'll do it for today's Ron Show. Thank you so much for listening. Weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. On Georgia Now. The replay 8 a.m. on Georgia Now. 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Show notes, as always, at ronshowatl.com. See you tomorrow. Take care.